All right, everybody, we are back with the second half of section 11 of our public policy course. And in this subsection, we're going to talk about kind of um, the theories, the philosophies behind incarceration that we have talked about in the first half of this section, mainly deterrence, incapacitation, and rehabilitation. We're going to talk about how mass incarceration either helps or doesn't help based on each of those three philosophies or theories. Now, we're going to begin with the concept of deterrence. And deterrence, again, originally kind of formulated and written down by Beccaria back in the 18th century. That kind of philosophy is based on the idea that crime is a rational choice. In fact, there is a very similar theory to deterrence that is just referred to as rational choice theory. Now, is crime a rational choice? Obviously, choice has something to do with everybody's action, right? We all have free will, so everybody has to make choices. The question is whether those choices are truly rational in the sense that people will calculate the odds of getting caught and the possible punishments if they're caught, if those will even kind of enter the equation when they're making the choice whether to commit a crime or not. Now, spoiler alert, the huge majority of evidence that we have says that no, increased punishments do not have really any effect on people's decisions and desires and activities when it comes to committing crime or not. One thing that might make a difference is informal punishment, right? The only thing we as a society have control over is the formal punishments for crime. Prison, fines, the death penalty, whatever. Those are all formal punishments. But the only kind of punishment that might have any kind of effect on people's choices whether to commit crimes or not are the informal punishments. From losing a job you love, to your mom and dad being mad at you, to disappointing your children. Those kind of personal relationships that suffer could possibly affect deterrence. Meaning the more personal attachments, the more, whether people have children or spouses or parents that love them, that might increase the deterrent effect of crime. But the formal punishments don't seem to have any kind of effect on whether people commit crimes or not. Now, when you're talking about deterrence, in this manner, we need to distinguish between absolute deterrence and marginal deterrence. Okay, absolute deterrence refers to the amount of people or the amount of deterrence that just making something illegal will have. Because there's a huge percentage of the population that will refrain from committing some act just because it's illegal, right? Me personally, I assault people and burglarize homes at zero just because it's illegal. I mean, it's also wrong and morally and ethically, but, you don't have to kind of scare me by having some high-level punishment for those crimes. I'm not doing them just because A, they're wrong, and B, they're illegal in the first place, right? What increased punishments is designed to do is to increase the marginal deterrence, right? So the absolute deterrence is the number of people or the percentage of people that will be deterred from committing a crime just because it's illegal. And that's going to be some number between 0 and 100. The marginal deterrence is the additional people that will be deterred from committing whatever that crime is as you increase the punishment for that crime. So absolute deterrence works by saying, hey, burglary is illegal. You deter some large percentage of the population from committing burglary at that point. The marginal deterrence is when you say, okay, the punishment for burglary is going to go to 1 year in prison. Now we're going to change it to 2 years in prison. Now we're going to change it to 5 years in prison. Each one of those jumps, each one of those increases in punishment is going to deter, theoretically at least, some additional number or additional percentage of the people away from committing that crime. And what research has once again shown is that the marginal deterrent effect is basically zero. The number of increased people that you will deter when you increase the punishments for any given crime, whether it's burglary or drugs or murder or whatever, is very, very, very small. All right. So the second argument we talked about when it comes to mass incarceration is incapacitation. Right? And this is the idea that we're going to take the worst of the worst. We're going to give them really long prison sentences, and then they won't be out and about in the community committing all those crimes, right? The marginal criminals that only commit a small amount of crime, we're going to give them relatively short sentences. The criminals who commit lots and lots of crime, we're going to keep them locked up for longer and longer periods, right? That's the theory behind this selective incapacitation. We want to selectively say, okay, you are going to be a career criminal, so for committing that burglary, you get 20 years in prison. You are just kind of a part-time criminal. We don't think you're going to offend again, so you only get 1 year in prison, right? There are lots of problems with this idea that we can figure out who the worst of the worst are, and then make sure they spend a lot of their time, or even most of their time, or the rest of their lives, behind bars, while singling out the people who are probably never going to commit crime again and give them relatively light sentences. First off, lots and lots of people, criminal justice researchers, sociologists, all kinds of groups, have attempted to design ways to predict the amount of crime somebody will commit in the future. And they've all been terrible. We as a species seem to be really bad at predicting who is going to commit more crimes in the future and who is going to stop committing crime from now on, right? So once we arrest people, we convict people for committing some crime. Okay, now we need you to predict whether if we let that person out of prison or we give that person probation or, they somehow rejoin the community after their prison sentence or whatever, what are the odds that they're going to commit more crimes in the future? We're going to see them in that courtroom again. We're going to see them sent back to prison. We're just really, really bad at predicting that. They've tried numerous different ideas, numerous different theories, numerous different mathematical algorithms and correlations to criminal offending and all those things. And none of them work very well. Even the best of them work very slightly better than a coin flip. So this entire idea of selective incapacitation just doesn't really work. So we have to move to what's called collective incapacitation, meaning we kind of treat everybody, or a much higher percentage of people at the very least, as if they're going to commit lots and lots more crime if we let them out. So we're going to give longer prison sentences to everybody. The problem here is you get diminishing returns, right? So if we locked up only a few people who commit a high percentage of crime, that's going to reduce crime by a lot. But the wider we have to cast that net, and the more people we throw into this long-term incarceration bus, which we have to do because we have such terrible success at distinguishing between the two groups, the more people we throw in, the smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller the amount of impact it's actually having on crime gets. And the last problem with this idea, at least the last one we're going to talk about in this slide, is the ethical issue, right? There's ethical, questionable, it is questionable ethically if taking two people who committed the same crime and giving one a larger punishment than the other because one was deemed more likely to commit more crime in the future than the other, that's bad, right? At least in 21st century common ethics, people should get the same punishment for the same crime and not have an increased punishment based on some theoretical future offending. Right? There was an entire movie 10 or 15 or 20 years ago called Minority Report that dealt with the ethical issues involved in trying to punish people for a future crime. Right? Now, rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is kind of the idea that we can fix people. If people are in prison, it's because there's something wrong with them. We need to be there to kind of fix whatever's wrong with them, whether it's mental illness or lack of socialization or a lack of marketable skills or whatever. And once we fix them, they can leave prison and be law-abiding members of society. Now, rehabilitation is very popular. It's not as popular as the whole revenge idea, though. People deserve to be punished if they did wrong, which is one of the other justifications for punishment. So rehabilitation is popular, but revenge is more popular. Meaning, sure, people love the idea of rehabilitating prisoners, but the kind of primary focus is to make sure they pay for what they did, which means long prison sentences, low rates of parole and probation. One of the big issues with this is that it assumes offenders need fixing. There's something wrong with them that we can go in and fix, right? And this is not true of many offenders on either end of the spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, it's not true because there's nothing we can do to make these people commit less crime. They're just the kind of person who's going to go out and commit more crime no matter what we do, no matter what marketable skills we give them, no matter what kind of anger management or life skills or therapy or whatever, they're going to continue to commit crimes. It stinks. I hate to say it. But there are some people that we're not going to be able to help. And unfortunately, we can't distinguish those in any kind of objective way from the people we can help. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's the people that don't need fixing because they're already fixed. You know, even if we just completely ignore their rehabilitation, let them serve out their sentence, and then go home and re-enter the community, they're never going to commit a crime again. They don't need any rehabilitation because they did this one thing wrong. They went to prison. They're paying the price for it. They're going to get out, and they're never going to commit a crime again, no matter what we do. And this is a huge percentage of all the people who are arrested for felony charges will never commit another felony again. Right? So why do we need to rehabilitate those people? Seems like a waste of time and resources, right? And there might be some benefit to even those people, i.e., getting them a better job, improving their social relationships, but there is not a reduction in crime benefit. You can't reduce below zero in this situation, right? Another problem is even the best rehabilitation programs that we have developed are nowhere near 100% effective. You know, rehabilitation programs will commonly, be called a success if they reduce recidivism by 20%, right? And that's nowhere near the kind of 100% effectiveness we would need to have a punishment system based entirely and solely around rehabilitation. All right, so we have this giant issue with mass incarceration in the United States, right? We've locked up all these people in an attempt, literally more than any other country on the planet, in an attempt to reduce crime in the United States. If we lock all the bad people away, all the law-abiding people will be able to enjoy their lives in the community without having to fear the amount of crime that they would if those people weren't locked away, right? That's the idea behind this mass incarceration issue, this mass incarceration idea. And we want to know, what good has it done? And there's two ways to kind of grade that. The first is effectiveness, i.e., did we reduce crime? And the second is efficiency. What did it cost to get any effectiveness that we might have seen? Now, both of those have been kind of looked at separately. And in the 90s, at the peak of the crime wave, right? Because if you think back historically, crime kind of climbed during the 70s and 80s, peaked in the early to mid 90s, and has been steadily dropping ever since in the United States. So kind of during that crime peak, slightly after, there were lots of, or I shouldn't say lots of, but there were a few studies that showed that this increasing reliance on deterrence and incapacitation had reduced crime in the United States maybe a little. Right? There was some modest amount of reduction in crime because all of those people had been taken off the streets and put into prison. But since the 90s, there's been more analysis using more data, using better statistical methods. And what they've really found is there's no difference. We would have had the exact same amount of crime, or a statistically indistinguishable amount of crime, whether all those people were locked up or not. Locking up all those people really didn't help at all. Didn't have any real effect on the crime rate. Now, we can also look at efficiency, right? And there's two different kinds of efficiency. There's the actual dollar cost in hard economic terms, and there's the human cost, right? And in hard economic cost, just looking at the dollars and cents of it all, the corrections system in this country costs about $80 billion a year. That's a heck of a lot of money. For, again, no real benefit. And then you add that into the human costs, the impact on the people and the communities of the United States. I mean, we already talked about that economic cycle where people who have been convicted of a crime and gone to prison and then released from prison, whether it's on parole or just, they're free and clear, they have a very difficult time for the rest of their lives trying to find jobs. Plus, while they're in prison, it affects the ability of their families, children, spouses, all those groups. It has an economic impact on everybody around them. And then that cycle kind of becomes amplified. And this can lead to geographic areas, especially areas characterized with, already economically struggling, lots of racial minority groups. This results in what the criminal justice field calls social disorganization. Transient families, moving in, moving out, People don't know their neighbors. People don't care about those around them because things are so transient, so economically depressed. And those are the neighborhoods where crime increases. So once again, we've got this geographically concentrated areas of any given city, any given state, where crime is kind of becomes this vicious cycle. Incarceration causes more crime, causes more incarceration, causes more crime. And thus the mass incarceration problem just builds on itself. All right, I wish we could end this section on a happier note, but I really hope to see you back for section 12. Thank you so much for watching.